Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this world as a test for us. إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا مَا عَلَى الْأَرْضِ زِينَةً لَهَا لِنَبْلُوَهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. We have made all that is on this earth an adornment so that we may test them to see those who are best in their deeds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Did people think that they would be left alone to say that they believe and that they would not be put to the test? As if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, do they not realize this world was made for tests and trials? These tests may come about in our blessings, in our ease and comfort, in our wealth and luxury. Or the test may come about in hardship, in difficulty, in toil and suffering, and in illness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us through the Quran that this dunya is finite and it will come to an end. إِنَّمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا مَتَاعٌ وَإِنَّ الْآخِرَةَ هِيَ دَارُ الْقَرَارِ. Indeed, the life of this world is only temporary, a temporary enjoyment. And the life of the next world, it is the place of permanency. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also reminds us of the hour of the last day. فَهَلْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا السَّاعَةَ أَن تَأْتِيَهُمْ بَغْتَةً. Do they await except that the hour, the final hour, will come upon them unexpectedly? فَقَدْ جَاءَ أَشْرَاطَهَا. And its signs have already come. The signs, the indications of the final hour have already come. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. That indeed the hour has come closer and the moon has split. And He says, وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّ السَّاعَةَ تَكُونُ قَرِيبًا. That what will make you think that the hour has come, or the hour is very close to arriving. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of the day of judgment, of the final hour, and of the signs of the final hour. And our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do the same. Hudayfa radiallahu anhu narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam قال لقد خطبنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خطبة ما ترك فيها شيئا إلى قيام الساعة. He said the Prophet gave a speech to us. He did not leave a single thing of the events that will take place until the day of judgment, until the final hour, except that he mentioned it to us. فَذَكَرَهُ مَنْ ذَكَرَهُ وَجَهِلَهُ مَنْ جَهِلَهُ. That those who remembered it, and those who forgot it and were ignorant of it, forgot it. He said, until there would be events that would take place that I had forgotten, that when I would see them, it would remind me that the Prophet ﷺ informed me about them. The Prophet would teach the ummah of the signs of the final hour, to remind them, and more importantly, to prepare them spiritually for what is coming. And one of the matters that the Prophet ﷺ would remind the ummah of repeatedly, one of the signs of the hour that the Prophet ﷺ would repeatedly remind this ummah of, is the fitna of the false Messiah, is the fitna of a Dajjal. The Prophet ﷺ said, لا فتنة أعظم من فتنة الدجال. There is no trial that is greater than the trial of a Dajjal. And one hadith, and some of its chains are considered sound, the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يخرج الدجال حتى يذهل الناس عن ذكره وحتى تترك الأئمة ذكره على المنابر. He said that the Dajjal will not emerge until the people wane from mentioning him. The people stop mentioning him. And until the imams stop mentioning him from their pulpits. He will emerge when people no longer take the warning of him seriously. When people no longer spread the teachings and the advice of our Prophet ﷺ. So in hopes that Allah protects us from the fitna of a Dajjal. Today's khutbah will be about a Dajjal. We should never want to experience that kind of fitna. The Prophet ﷺ said, ما كانت ولا تكون فتنة حتى تقوم الساعة أعظم من فتنة الدجال وما من نبي إلا وحذر قومه الدجال. He said, there has never been and never was, nor shall there be until the day of judgment, a greater trial than the trial of a Dajjal, and that there is no prophet that Allah has sent except that He warned His people of the trial of a Dajjal. Every single prophet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent came to their people and told their people of the coming of the impostor Messiah, of the false Messiah. The Prophet says in one hadith, وَأَنَا آخِرُ نَبِي لَا مَحَالَةً. He said, I am the final prophet. There is no way except that he will come amongst you. There is no possibility except that he will come for this ummah. Because there is no Nabi after our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In one hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, ما بين خلق آدم إلى قيام الساعة أعظم من الدجال. أو في لفظ أمر أعظم من أمر الدجال. He said, from the time that Allah created Adam until the establishment of the hour, there is nothing, no greater affair than the affair of a Dajjal. And the Prophet ﷺ would seek refuge, protection, Allah's protection from a Dajjal, and teach the believers to do so in each of their salah. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said the Prophet used to teach it to us like he used to teach the Quran, the dua. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adhab al-qabr. Oh Allah, I seek your refuge from the punishment of the grave. Wa a'udhu bika min adhab jahannam. And I seek your refuge from the punishment of the hellfire. Wa a'udhu bika min fitnat al-masih al-dajjal. And I seek your refuge from the trials of the false Messiah. Wa a'udhu bika min fitnat al-mahya wal-mamat. And I seek your refuge from the trials of living and of dying. He would say this at the end of his tashahhud, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and teach the believers to do the same. And the final sermon of our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Khutbah al-Wada'a, which we discussed recently in another khutbah, where the Prophet spoke to the people and said, you may not see me after this year. And he spoke to them about so many important matters that persist and that human beings must be aware of racial and tribal discrimination. He spoke to us about brotherhood. He admonished the people to treat their women kindly. He abolished usury. And here, according to Ibn Umar, the Prophet ﷺ gave the khutbah and khutbah al-wada'a in Arafah and another khutbah in Mina. And he warned the believers of a Dajjal. وَحَذَّرَ مِنْهُ تَحْذِيرًا بَالِغًا. He said he gave an eloquent warning about a Dajjal, about the false Messiah. Every prophet has warned his people about a Dajjal because of the greatness of the fitna, the evil tribulation it would be. And because the believer has to be informed of his fitna, because the kind of fitna that he comes with, the kind of trial, the kind of persecution that he comes with is something that will be mimicked in society. Is something that will emerge before his emergence. Just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Yahya alayhi salam, a prophet, for what reason? To prepare the people for the real Messiah. To prepare the people for the real Messiah, Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam. Likewise, there will be those who are preparing the people to accept the false Messiah. There will be those who are preparing the people to take on the lies of the lying Messiah. The Prophet ﷺ has said, يَكُونُ فِي آخِرِ الزَّمَانِ دَجَّالُونَ كَذَّابُونَ يأتونكم من الأحاديث ما لم تسمعوا أنتم ولا آباءكم فإياكم وإياهم لا يضلونكم ولا يفتنونكم. The Prophet ﷺ said, in the last days, there will be kadhabun, liars, dajjalun, like the Dajjal. And they will be telling you things that you never heard. They will bring you traditions that you never heard from your forefathers before you. They will be making up stuff that you never heard and the Muslims before you never heard and followed. So do not follow them and be led astray. And one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تقوم الساعة حتى تخرج 30 كذابا دجالا كلهم يكذب على الله ورسوله. That the hour will not occur until there are 30 liars, many dajjals, all of them lying about Allah and His Messenger. From Musaylim al-Kadhab to Mirza Ghulam Ahmad to Elijah Muhammad to Rashad Khalifa, all of these people coming with the same methods, lying about Allah and His Messenger, using charisma to scam the people, contradicting what we know about our religion, what is established in the Quran and Sunnah, inventing things we never heard the early Muslims following or believing. All of them imposters, all of them paving the way of the greater impostor. The Prophet ﷺ said, من سمع بالدجال فلينأ عنه فوالله إن الرجل يأتيه وهو يحسب أنه مؤمن فيتبعه مما يبعث معه من الشبهات. The Prophet ﷺ says, whoever amongst you hears of a Dajjal, let him run away. Go away from them. He said, for indeed a person will think of themselves as a believer, and they will go to him, and they will be confused by his confusions, and they will follow him. Dajjal will change the faith and confuse the people. He will change halal and haram, fard and wajib. Today we see the streams of Dajjalic thought, the streams of the methods of Dajjal rising. You see people saying there's nothing wrong with being a Muslim who lives a homosexual lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with Muslims accepting the transgender lifestyle. We say the Quran and Sunnah is clear. These are sins. Yes, a Muslim may be afflicted with sins. A Muslim might struggle with sins. But to say that the sin itself is good, to label oneself, to brand oneself with the sin, to say that one is a gay Muslim, is like saying one is a fornicating Muslim, or a usurious Muslim, or a drinking Muslim. Yes, the Muslim may fall into these sins, but the Muslim can never celebrate these sins. The idea that the sin is to be celebrated, the sin is to be cherished. This is rejecting the premise, the authority, the sanctity of the Quran and Sunnah. It's denying what is ma'loom min ad-din bil-darura, denying what is axiomatically known to be true in our faith. And in fact, you see that in people. And you see in other people claiming to follow the Quran and rejecting the Sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ. Yet the Quran is clearly telling you, listen to the Prophet. The Quran is clearly telling you, obey the Prophet. If someone gave you directions to do something, and then said, if you have any questions, if you need any clarification, ask so-and-so. And then you go and you get confused, or you don't know the answer, and you don't ask so-and-so, you don't listen to them, have you followed the directions? No. Likewise, Allah has given you instructions in the Quran and told you in those instructions, listen to the Prophet. Understand these instructions from the Prophet. So if you are not to listen to him, you have rejected the instructions to begin with. And you cannot faithfully understand the Quran and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you in the Quran without understanding the Sunnah, since the Quran is referring to incidents and events that are happening in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They want to strip the Quran of its context in order to strip away the meaning of it. You see people today claiming salah, zakah, siyam. These are all optional. It's up to you if you want to do it. Drinking alcohol is completely fine. In fact, you may even hear people call themselves Muslim atheists. And yes, indeed, there are those who call themselves Muslim atheists. You may say, how is this possible? How is a Muslim, someone who submits to Allah, how can they simultaneously be an atheist, someone who rejects Allah? And the reason is because they empty the word Muslim from all of its meaning. The word Muslim becomes an identity. The word Muslim becomes a brand, a label, but it has no meaning. It has no value. It's not beliefs. It's not a way of life. And if you say this is crazy, this is nonsense, this is illogical, the religion has its principles, has its methods, which are widely understood and should be respected, and if someone wants to claim it, they should follow it, then they will say, you are the extremist, you are the fundamentalist, you are the radical. This is the method of Dajjal, to change the reality of a thing, to invert the reality. They tell you that a woman is a man and a man is a woman. They tell you the idea of a man and a woman is just that, it's just an idea. It's a made-up idea, has no basis in reality. They invert the truth and hide the truth and conceal the truth. They tell you today that war is peace. They tell you that genocide is self-defense. They carpet bomb the entirety of Gaza. They force doctors out of the hospitals at gunpoint and leave the babies in the hospital to die of starvation. They announce the desire to block food. They open fire at food distribution points. They prevent aid trucks from entering. And then they say starvation is not happening. They kill over 20,000 children. And they say it's self-defense, but if you try to defend yourself, then they will say that you are a terrorist. They tell you they are the peacemakers, and they are the most corrupt. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ. If you tell them, stop the corruption, they will say, we are the peacemakers. أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمُ الْمُفْسِدُونَ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. Unquestionably, they are the ones who are corrupters, but they do not perceive it. Just recently, a U.S. congressman was asked about Israel killing around 300 civilians to rescue 4 of their hostages. 300 civilians they killed. They said to him, is this okay? He said, it's terrible, we never want to see a civilian die, etc., etc. But in the end he says, we would do the same. We, America, would do the same. And it's worth the price. The 300 they killed, it's worth the price. So he asked him, the interviewer, we know that Israel is holding thousands of Palestinian prisoners. And according to even US media, CNN did an investigation. They're being tortured in these prisons. Some of them being killed in the most gruesome forms. I will not mention it only because there are children here. Gruesome forms of torture. They said, would they be allowed, or is it reasonable for them to kill 300 Israeli civilians to free some of the Palestinian prisoners? And of course he went quiet. Of course he could not answer. Because the real answer is they are not interested in peace. The real answer is they are interested in land and power and in extracting resources from the Muslim world. The Dajjal is the great liar, the great imposter. And we should be aware of the great liars in our day and age. Look at how just a few years ago, the World Cup of soccer was held in Qatar. Remember all the hoopla they had about Qatar banning the LGBTQ flag. How fierce the criticism from the West was, because they wouldn't let them raise the rainbow flag. They called them barbaric and backwards, despotic, a tyrant country. There's no freedom in that country. You might remember the German soccer team taking a photo, all of them covering their mouths in protest, trying to say we're not allowed to speak, we're not allowed to express ourselves. That same country of Germany today has banned saying the phrase "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." That same country has banned in places holding up the Palestinian flag or wearing the kufiya. What happened to freedom of speech? They send police to Palestinian protests, 10 police officers to one protester, employing extreme methods against the protesters to break up any rally. What happened to freedom? They banned Jewish academics from entering Germany because those Jewish academics are critical of Israel. What happened to freedom? Are they not covering their mouths anymore? The Prophet ﷺ informed us of the methods of Dajjal. We should be aware of them. He said he will come معه جنة ونار فناره جنة وجنته نار. He will come with a nar, with a hellfire, and with a jannah, with a paradise. And the Prophet said, be aware, his paradise is hellfire, and his hellfire is paradise. He seduces the people to go into Jannah. They see its rivers and its trees and its splendor, but in reality it is a hellfire. Likewise, they present the life of the Muslim in this world. They tell you it is demeaning. It is lacking freedom. They tell you to live as a Muslim is oppressing our women. They say to live as a Muslim is to live in a prison. They tell you that truly liberated people, the truly liberal people who are truly free are them. The ones who follow every lust and desire, who abandon every responsibility and duty. But look at the end of the road. They follow their path. They end up alone. Their relationships are shattered by their selfishness. They destroy their families and they say, we will have our chosen family. We don't care about our blood relations, we'll have a chosen family. And in the end, they have no family. Their bodies are destroyed by alcohol and drugs. And the believer, they told you that believer is not living in freedom. They're living oppressive lifestyle. That believer, they told you, is not free, is surrounded by their family that they sacrificed for. Their family that they spent so much time with. Now their family is repaying them with company and with love. That believer is living with peace in their mind, serenity in their life with every salah, with every dhikr that they make. Are these two lives equal? Never. What they tell you is Jannah is nar, and what they tell you is nar is Jannah. The Prophet ﷺ also mentions of the fitna of Dajjal. He mentions one hadith in Musnad Ahmad that Dajjal will come to the gates of Medina, will not be able to enter because of the angels that are protecting the city of Medina. But that many women will leave Medina and go and follow Dajjal. فيكون أكثر من يخرج إليه النساء حتى أن الرجل يرجع إلى أمه وابنته وأخته وعمه. He says that the women will go out until some of the men will go to their women folk, their mothers and their daughters and their sisters, and they will even bound them, fearing that they are going to go out and join a Dajjal. Why does the Prophet ﷺ mention this impact, especially on women? We see the social movements happening around us. We see women often are the most affected, for example, by the LGBTQ narrative. Why? I was speaking to a high school teacher in a public school. So many of his classroom are Muslim. He said when it comes to this topic, most of the girls believe it. Most of the boys are skeptical, but most of the girls believe it. Why? Because they manipulate our sense of compassion. Don't you want to be kind? Don't you want to be tolerant? Don't you want to be accepting? Don't you want to be caring? All of us want to be like that. But if they came and told you, you should be okay with a young child taking corrosive drugs, going through irreversible surgery, everybody would say that is horrible. But if you say this is caring, this is compassion, this is kindness, this is acceptance, They manipulate our feelings of compassion. And people start to fall into accepting this because of this manipulation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created women with even greater sense of compassion than men. And unfortunately, there are evil people who want to manipulate that sense of compassion. Likewise, we see popular movements like feminism. They promise women everything. And in reality, they are stealing from women far more than they are giving. They promise women freedom and independence, yet they rob them of their femininity. They tell them in reality, for a woman to be free, she must be like the man. They create a standard where perfection is the man, and they're telling women to be like men. So for women to be truly feminist, they have to throw away their femininity. They rob them of this, and they rob them of their central role of being a mother, a caregiver, a nurturer. Instead, freedom and independence becomes a euphemism for being childless, alone, insecure. The Prophet ﷺ said, I will tell my ummah what no other prophet has told his ummah. إِنَّهُ أَعْوَرُ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَيْسَ بِأَعْوَرُ. That Dajjal will be one-eyed, and Allah is not one-eyed. One-eyed is literal. One of his eyes will not function, the other eye will. And one hadith, it will be swollen like a grape. But also we can understand from this meaning, the one who is one-eyed is limited in their vision. The one who is one-eyed, their depth perception is not perfect. Things that are far away, everything seems like it's near to them because of their depth perception. Likewise, Ad-Dajjal will be teaching his followers to focus on the dunya. He will promise them a utopia in the dunya. They will be singularly focused on the dunya, not the akhirah. And the real Masih, Isa ibn Maryam, his teachings were what? Forget about the dunya and think about the akhirah. Al-Hasan rahimahullah ta'ala said, Inna Isa ra's al-zahideen yawm al-qiyamah. That Isa alayhi salam will be the leader of the zahideen, those who don't care about the dunya and they prioritize the akhirah. He will be the leader of them on the day of judgment. Dajjal tells his followers, only think about the dunya. And he goes around, those who follow them, those who follow a Dajjal will receive rain, and those who do not follow the Dajjal will not receive rain. And yet when Isa alayhi salam comes and fights a Dajjal and kills him, he will break the cross, he will kill the swine. These are acts of symbolism to show that his way is not the way that was invented after him by the Christians. And in his time there will be so much money, as the Prophet ﷺ said, وَيُفِيضُ الْمَالِ. Wealth will be so plentiful that there will be no one worthy of zakah. There will be no one in need of zakah. So a Dajjal is telling them, look to the dunya, and in the end he can't even deliver the dunya. And Al-Masih ibn Maryam alayhi salam is telling them, look to the akhirah, and when they believe in him and they look to the akhirah, they will even get the dunya. And such is our faith. فأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم استغفروه إنه الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in the hadith, إن يخرج وأنا فيكم فأنا حجيج دونكم. وَإِنْ يَخْرُجْ وَلَسْتُ فِيكُمْ فَمَرُّوا حَجِيجُ نَفْسِهِ وَاللَّهُ خَلِيفَتِي عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ. He said, if Dajjal were to come forward and I am amongst you, I will be the one arguing on your behalf. But if he were to come forth and I am not amongst you, then every man will have to dispute on his own. Everyone will be for themselves. And Allah will take my place in looking after the Muslim. How do we protect ourselves from a Dajjal? I know there's no time, so I'll just go very, very quickly. The first, the Prophet ﷺ says, بَادِرُوا بِالْأَعْمَالِ قَبْلِ سِتَّةِ. He said, hasten to do good deeds before 6 things. And one of the things that he mentions is Ad-Dajjal. So our good deeds before the time of fitna give us iman. And our iman, when it is strong enough, will protect us against the Dajjal. The Prophet ﷺ said, Ad-Dajjal has the word kafir on his forehead. Kafara, these letters. He said every Muslim will be able to read it. So our iman has to be strong enough that when the fitna arrives, we are strong enough to see our way through it. The Prophet said in another hadith, there are three things, لا ينفع نفسا إيمانها لم تكن آمنت من قبل أو كسبت في إيمانها. He said, there are three things where iman will not benefit the person if they didn't have it before it. If they didn't have iman before that. And one of the things that he mentions is a Dajjal. You need to have your iman before a Dajjal, so that your iman delivers you through that difficulty. Likewise, the Prophet ﷺ says, whoever memorizes the first 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf will be protected from the fitna of a Dajjal. And another hadith, the last 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf. And he says, whoever amongst you sees a Dajjal, let him counter him with the verses of Surah Al-Kahf. Finally, the Prophet ﷺ, as we mentioned, told the believers after their tashahhud in their salah to make the dua the Prophet ﷺ made, that he would seek refuge in Allah from the punishment of the grave, from the punishment of the hellfire, the punishment of the grave, from the fitna of a Dajjal, and from the fitna of living and dying. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect all of us from the fitna in our lives, to protect us from the fitna of a Dajjal and from all the other minor Dajjals in this world. Inna Allahu malaikatahu yusalluna ala al-nabiyya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima.